Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
A lot of beautiful stuff. A lot of beautiful stuff. Okay, so we find ourselves in the fundamentals class, Gimel, third fundamentals class, called boundaries, perceived or otherwise. Boundaries, perceived or otherwise. Because we've been discussing passionately about how we can find ways to motivate ourselves to compassion for non-Jews and to reach out to them, to bring them close through the Amat Emet, through the channel to truth, which is the Jewish people, the Torah, Torah Sheba'al Peh, Moshe is our prophet. And we've been discussing this passion of wanting to stir up within ourselves this a wave of kindness that would that would inspire us, at least to change our attitudes, so that it's when we don't have to be afraid of non-Jews, that we are supposed to love them. We're supposed to, in of us it says two things. We're supposed to ohev abriyos, and we're supposed to sameach es abriyos. We're supposed to love all human beings, and we're supposed to bring joy to all human beings. And that only comes through being ba'asik Torah lishma. For us, we have to make sure that our attitude in Torah is right. And if it is, then we're going to have these abilities to approach and be kind and to bring joy to people. But as we said, there are boundaries. There are boundaries that come in three types, three categories of boundaries that we need to be aware of in our excitement to approach non-Jews. First are external boundaries. External boundaries I'm defining as halachich, real boundaries. These are real laws that are halachich, and they need to be followed, halachic boundaries. The second category is the internal boundaries. Those are our perceived boundaries. The things that we, whether because we didn't learn or for whatever reason, we have this sense in us that we put up these fences and we put up these walls and these bubbles that we put ourselves in that are not halachic and therefore illusionary. They're illusionary. And the third type of boundary are foreign boundaries. These are imposed upon us by B'nai Noach. So we're going to run up against boundaries that they are going to put up against us.
So the first one was the halacha.
Halacha.
Okay.
Halacha. These are boundaries that we have to follow.
That we have, right?
We have them. All right. We're going to discuss them. Okay. The second, internal, means I have this idea that I can't smile to a non-Jew because I grew up in an environment where it was quote-unquote taboo to be nice to non-Jews, and I was just taught that way. I didn't know that we're supposed to love all Jews, we're supposed to pray for them. Rabbi Engel just told me a story. He said that he halacha doesn't make it go out of his way for him to go and visit Bikur Cholim, right, visiting the sick. And he can't go into a hospital because he is a Kohen. He can't go into a hospital. But if he goes into, let's say, a nursing home, and there's a non-Jew there who opens up a conversation with him, he's not only going to sit there with him and talk to him and be kind to him and encourage him, he says he's going to leave him with a bracha. He's going to bless him. You see, Rabbi Engel, cream of the crop. Mm-hmm. He hops this idea of loving all human beings. He knows. And I'm going to give another story about Rabbi Engel. He's a Cohen, that's right. The love of Aaron. The love of Aaron. Love of Aaron. Boy, it just exudes from you, my friend. And then we'll talk about foreign. Those are the imposed. Okay, so we have an example from the Torah of boundaries that we have. And the Beis HaMikdash is a microcosm of the universe. The first thought of Hashem was something called Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, because the first will, the first idea that the Almighty wanted to create was human beings, righteous human beings. He had Israel in mind. He had a righteous nation in mind that would make a dwelling place for him in this lowest world of Sia, right? So the Beis HaMikdash is a microcosm of Adam Kadmon, of a human being. It's set up this way. So let me show you a picture from this awesome sefer called the Beis HaMikdash. I'm going to try to get it in the frame. Okay. All right. Try to get it in the frame, and then whoever's watching can then just pause it and go back to it and reference what I'm going to say. So I'm going to be moving the Sefer around. Okay. So here we see the Beis HaMikdash. Okay. We see it as different compartments. Okay. So I'm going to start with Rachi here. So first of all, we have the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy Holies. It's inside the main part of the temple. And then where the door is, we have the holy place. And then these are where the Kohanim, and the Kohen Gadol would only be able to go into the holy place once a year, the Holy of Holies, okay? And Aaron would be in this area here. He would be over here making my chait offerings. Aaron would here, he would be, right? Okay, this is the area of the Kohanim.
Oh, but I'm a Levi.
I mean the Levi, the Levim, the Levim.
No,
No, the Levim. You'd be the Levim. You'd be the Levim. Okay, so we already see parts that are separated from one another. There are parts that people can go and others can't. Okay, so here, look, here we have the court of the women. Here we have the court of the women. Here. Okay, court of the women. Okay. And notice here, there's a fence. Is this the one that has it? Ah, this is the one that has it. Let me close this up. Does this one have it too? It doesn't. Now notice here that there is a fence all the way around. It looks like a picket fence. You see it all the way around? Here? A little picket fence. I don't even know if I'm pointing to it. Yeah, little picket fence that goes all the way around. Okay. You see that little picket fence that's on the outside?
Yeah.
That is called the court of the nations, the court of the Gentiles. Now, they could not pass that barrier.
In or out?
No, they could not pass into the temple
okay.
past that barrier. They could come, and that's where they would pray. That's where they would organize, and pray, and they would daven to Hashem, and they would come. But this is.
That's as far as they can
But
go.
that's as far as they could go, to that barrier. Okay, so we see an example from Adam Kadmon through the Beis HaMikdash, which is a microcosm of a human being, that there is a certain boundary for Levim, there's a certain boundary for Kohanim, there's a boundary for the women, the men, and for B'nai Noach, for non-Jews, those who would come and worship for all nations. They would come and worship at the Holy Temple. Okay? That was Halachich. What I showed you was a Halachic boundary. That is a real boundary. Okay? So let's go over some examples of Halachic boundaries. It primarily, as Rachi told me in my research, she was absolutely on target. The halachic boundaries primarily revolve around kashrus. Kashrus. The laws in the Torah that limit us on what is kosher, that we can eat, and not kosher, and what we can eat. And of course we know that it goes beyond the food, but it goes also to the utensils, even goes to the table that we're eating on. Kashrus has a lot of halachas associated with it, and so there are a lot of restrictions. And these restrictions, we have to follow them, and we have to be aware of them when we're having interactions with non-Jewish people that we're excited to go out and meet, and we're excited to bring close to the 7 mitzvahs b'nai Noach. We're excited for it, but we have to be careful. Okay, there are two main categories that are the strictest. One is wine. Wine is like one of kashrus. It's one of the most strict of the elements that we have to make sure stays kosher. As a matter of fact, if you go into a grocery store, if you find a bottle of wine that's not marked mevushal, if it hasn't been boiled, we cannot drink it. We cannot have it. It's not kosher for us. Okay. Unless it has never been touched by non-Jews. It's never been touched by non-Jews. Now, mevushal wine, as long as it has two seals, a seal, we know, we open our wine as a seal and a cork, right? As long as it has both seals, we're fine. If we open the wine, so we even have to open the wine, the Jew has to open the bottle of wine, right? Then it's kosher for us, okay? Now, on Pesach, during the Haggadah, there's a certain portion, it's one of my favorite parts. We cover the matzah, we hold the cup and we say just a cryptic saying, this is what kept us through all of these years. It is this. It is this. I don't know if you're familiar with that part of the Haggadah. Now, it doesn't say anywhere what this is. You just covered the masa. But it's obvious what this is because you're holding the kois. This is what has kept us, our unique identity, our holiness for our purpose to serve Hashem, because by keeping wine kosher with all of its strictness, it's an example of how we as Jews have to maintain our purity, have to maintain our unique identity. See, we don't keep our unique identity because we want to be different than everyone else, or we want to distance ourselves from anyone. We keep our unique identity because we have a unique mission to perform. And if we do not keep that distinction, it stifles, it blocks the supernal light that flows through us that's supposed to go into the nations. For example, one of the restrictions halachically, and this is a big one, is we cannot have a social gathering with non-Jews where we're drinking alcohol together. Drinking alcohol together. This is something that we're forbidden to do halachically. Why? Because what it does is drinking, as we know, is a very social event. And what it does is it breaches this barrier that we, the Jews, are supposed to keep, not because we don't want to have a drink with a friend. It's not because we don't want to have fellowship with a friend, a non-Jewish friend, and drink with them. But if we were to do that, it would again it would be contradictory to our mission and our purpose. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard the expression, a professional relationship? The relationship between these two people or these two families, it's a professional relationship. Therefore, you have to remain a professional conduct. You can't get too social because it's not that environment. Like if if you're at work and you have a buddy, that is a professional environment. You're not going to be talking and doing the same things you would be doing otherwise. Two friends at work aren't going to be cracking open beers and drinking and having a good time at work. That is not the environment.
Right.
That is a professional environment. So it's the same kind of idea that we, the Jewish people, not because we don't want to go into this area, but we know that we have to have this attitude in order for us to fulfill our mission. Because if we go into that deep of a social interaction, we then stop becoming priests of the nations, because we're supposed to be priests of the nations. We have a mission to be lights to the nations. And there is a certain respect that would be degraded if it went into a social relationship. You see, what's another example?
Because too, wine is, I have a cartoon, Deborah has a cartoon, the wine is for holy
It's for
events.
Conditions.
So socialization doesn't get to the holy level.
Right, but any alcohol.
Right.
Any alcohol. We're not supposed to have any kind of drinking with friends, non-Jewish friends, because again, what this does is it impedes our mission, and in the supernal realms, what it does is it blocks the flow of this light that we're supposed to be shining into the nations. We suddenly become friends and not Kohanim to the nations, right? That's what we're supposed to be, priests to the nations.
I was just thinking also about like the medical profession. Like you don't go to an orthopedist if you have a heart problem.
Right.
You have to respect each profession, and you go to the professional in that area. Or the criminal justice lawyer, you don't go for an estate planning,
Right. Exactly. And to take it a little further, that lawyer that you don't start talking about your kids, and you don't start talking about the ball game, and you don't start talking about what happened to you yesterday. It's a professional atmosphere and environment, and the talk stays professional.
Right.
So we as Jews, therefore, if we really want to be effective in being lights to the nations, we have to keep this professional barrier. Okay? And it's not so much a barrier. It is then the barrier then becomes a channel through which we can shine the light. Because now I'm not buddy-buddy, but I'm a Jew, and I'm trying to teach you, and I'm trying to bring you close to Torah and mitzvahs. I'm trying to bring you close to Sheva mitzvahs B'nai Noach. You see how that
It's
unfolds.
to keep, it's more like keeping yourself complete by closing,
There's that one fine line. You keep yourself in your kedushin, right? We have to maintain our identity, and we have to maintain our purity and our holiness in order to perfect the world. Okay? Now, so after I say all that, I asked a question to Rabbi Engel. I said, Rabbi Engel, talking about all of this, is it okay to go to visit the home of a non-Jew? You're going to the home of a non-Jew. The first thing he says is, well, what is the purpose? Well, the purpose is this person wants to learn about Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. He wants to learn about Torah. He wants to learn about coming close to God. He says, absolutely, positively, you can go. You go and you sit down and you learn. You can even if they want to offer you a glass of water, fine. If they want to offer you some fruit, it's okay. We just have to know where the halachic boundaries are for kashrus.
well, let me
Right?
tell you an experience. I went to the lady that is cleaning, helping us to clean. She lives in the second floor. I love her. She has become like family. And I just went in the apartment, and as soon as I came, it was a little candle with the image, and I felt uncomfortable. I felt myself like, what am I doing here? And I went just for your question, and I said, I better make sure, I don't think it's about a Torah. I don't know what kind of will be considered for us, but to go to a home of a non-Jew, I don't, there is certain
Right.
restrictions.
So in your case,
Maybe, like you said, the three, what they impose on themselves, that is not permissible for us.
that's not what I'm going to talk about. But you're right. That's just a given. We cannot take on any foreign worships of any kind.
Like I'm saying, if somebody invites you to her home, to his home, and you just go.
You have to go for a reason. So if it's going to encourage her, or
It doesn't matter what
that's
she or he
okay.
has?
Now, the halacha surrounding that, what you were talking about, that little candle, there are halachas surrounding that. Number one, you can't bend over in front of it.
Okay.
Even if you were to drop a $50 bill on the floor right there, you could not bend over to pick it up. So we know the halachas, then we're right. We're okay. If we know the halachas, right? So these are the things that we as Jews need to study. If we do get invited to someone's home, and they might be, like you say, a reverent Catholic person, and they have maybe many images and many idols in the home, we just have to know how to handle them and what to do in teaching. Now, okay, excellent.
It was uncomfortable, that's why I brought
Oh
it.
yeah, and I'm sure it would be. So maybe there could be other venues like.
That he
Let's
comes
meet-
to us,
Well, see, in your case, it's unique. Like Rabbi Engel cautioned, he said, now, if you have young daughters, teenagers in your home, and there's a non-Jewish man there, maybe he's single and he's really interested in Sheva Mitzvah B'nai Noach, but you don't want to bring him into your environment where your daughters could be walking in before, and he can put an ayin hara, maybe be attracted to her or whatever. We just have to be smart. So it's actually better to go to a non-Jew's house than to invite a non-Jew to your house for these things.
Interesting.
Right. But if a non-Jew shows up at Pesach, you sit him down at the table. He just shows up at your house. You sit him. If he shows up for Sukkot, he comes into the Sukkot and he eats and he enjoys and he participates, as an observer. Because this is something that we are permitted to do.
Can even hand him a bench, right?
Listen to this story, okay? There was an article in a magazine called Dachar, something like, I don't know what the word means, but it's a Chabad magazine, and guess what the title of the magazine is? Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, being a light to the nations. I couldn't believe it. It's just incredible how this is all starting to happen. But in here, there is a story of the Rebbe Schneerson, all right? For the video, the seventh Chabad Rebbe Schneerson. And he had one of his chassid was a dignitary. He was among big people in the government, and I guess there was a bigger person than him that he was going to honor, and he bought a real nice kais, a cup, a bencher, a becker, a kiddush cup, and he wrapped it up, and the Rebbe communicated back, and on the note, Becker, the Kiddush cup was circled with question marks and an exclamation point. He says, why are you going to give him a Becker? What's he going to do with it? He said, instead, give him a sitter. Give him a sitter. Now, we don't think about giving holy books to non-Jewish people. We don't think. But look, he says, because there are many, many prayers in the Siddur that apply to non-Jews, starting with the first one, Moedeh Ani. I thank you, Hashem, that I'm alive and that you return my soul to my body. You see, we have to change our whole paradigm of thinking about this. So even
What about the Psalms? The Psalms is open for all the
oh,
Christians,
Tehillim is wide open.
right?
Tehillim is wide open. As a matter of fact, we learned last week that all of Torah pretty much is open as long as they're studying it for knowledge and for pleasure. And we found out from Rabbi Pinson, I said it right this time, we found out from Rabbi Pinson that he can study the laws and try to fulfill the laws of tefillin, not by putting on tefillin, but by the purely spiritual dimension of subjugating his heart and his mind to Hashem. Isn't that absolutely mind-boggling?
That makes sense though, because if he gets to do that, then he can ascend to the lights that you were talking at the beginning.
Because we found out again that his soul, just like ours, has 613 compartments. So one of those 613 compartments is the mitzvah of tefillin. So how does he fulfill the mitzvah of tefillin? Rabbi Dov Ber Pinson says he meditates on subjugating his heart and his mind to Hashem. He doesn't do the actual act. Now we cannot do it in our minds. We have to start in the lower world. We have to start down in Asiya, in the world of action, not in the realm of thought. Because nothing happens in the upper world until an action happens in the lower world. So the only way we can elevate the world, and elevate tefillin, and elevate what it does, is we have to actually do the action first, which then pushes upward all of the rectifications and all of the changes and all of the tikkun and everything that's happening there. It's the same with prayer. We have to actually verbalize and move our lips, because if we don't, if we're just praying in our mind, the halacha is if you say the Shema in your mind, you're not yet to do the mitzvah. You have to say it out loud, because the action is the bending of your lips and the vapor of your mouth. And I recommend very highly the Chaim of Voloshin, Nefesh HaChaim, which will tell you the power and to the extent of which our davening and our reading Tehillim goes. This is one of his expressions. The bending of our lips and the vapor of our mouths makes tikkun and rectification all the way to the supernal root. All the way to the supernal root. Okay? So what about restaurants? What about restaurants? Let's say, now, I have to admit that I made a mistake. At first, there was so much pressure on me at work when I got my job that they had lunch meetings in the restaurant across the street. And so I said, you know what, I'll go and I'll just get a Coke out of the faucet, which is pretty fine, out of a to-go cup, right?
Right.
And I'll just sit there. I won't eat anything. I'll just sit there. And I was wrong. The halacha is you should not go into a non-kosher restaurant. We should not go to a non-kosher restaurant for a couple of reasons. Number one, non-Jews would say, oh, look, here's a really religious Jew, and he's here eating in this restaurant. What's more dangerous than that is the Maris Ayin of if a Jew, a non-religious Jew, is sitting in that restaurant, right, and he's eating, he says, he says, he says, look, right, here's this frum Jew eating in this restaurant, and it must be okay. See, I must be okay. So we have to be very careful about things like that. So going into a restaurant is an isser. It's usser to us. Okay. Now in a work environment, it's different. If you are in a work environment, like I go into, let's use Rabbi Ort. He goes into a very secure place. He probably has to badge in like 10 times, right? Retinal scan. Who knows what he has to go through to get into not Lockheed Martin, but where does he work? Raytheon. So that place is definitely secure. But he could take his lunch and he could sit down with his non-Jewish friends there, his non-Jewish
Part of the
coworkers.
building, right? It's part of.
Yeah, it's there, it's fine. He does what he has to do to cover the table, and he's not worried about any non-kosher things, accidentally splashing in because of bittul bashishi, etc. Right, 60 parts in, right. So he's not worried about that. Now I want to tell you an interesting story though that kind of goes over both ends of the spectrum, how it's permitted, but yet how we still have to be on guard. This story comes from Reb Mati Cecil. You know Mati Cecil.
Sure.
So Monty Cecil, he is a very successful businessman, and I guess he was meeting. I don't know what the meeting was about. He told the story. I don't know if it was a kiddush or if it was in a kiddush or if it was in a Verbrangen. I don't remember. But he said that he was invited to a meeting. It was in a corporate setting, I guess in a hotel. They had a room set up and they had it catered, brought in, and he ordered from the deli. He ordered from the East Side Kosher Deli his food. Now, what happened is they took, because when you do that, it comes with a seal. Mm-hmm. It comes with a seal over it, so you know that it hasn't been opened, because only you were supposed to open that and then eat from it, right? But what they did is they took his meal and they took a plate, and they very nicely, very kindly, I mean, it was a very kind idea to do. They took his meal and they arranged it really nice on the plate, and they brought it out to him.
They opened it. They broke the seal.
Well, yeah, they opened it up and took all his food and put it on one of the plates of the restaurant.
Fancy plate.
On the fancy plate, right? And they thought they were doing him a big kindness. And to them, it was a big kindness, right? And they set the plate before him, and he's like, okay. And this is what's going through his mind. Look, the plate is cold. The plate was cold. The food is cold. I could technically get away with this. But here I am a Jew, and before all of these non-Jews, and I'm supposed to be setting an example. And if I were to eat off of this plate here, it would demonstrate a barrier that had been broken.
For sure.
A barrier that had been broken. So he said, I'm sorry, I can't eat this meal. So what I'm showing you is two sides of the same coin. He was able to go and eat amongst his non-Jewish counterpart, but he wasn't willing to cross the barrier. He wasn't willing to cross the line of the halachic boundaries that we have. The external boundaries, they're set, halachic. The internal boundaries, he had broken through. He didn't say, oh, I'm afraid to eat with non-Jews, or whatever it might have been. Okay, so let's address the internal boundaries. So what are some internal boundaries? Our perceptions of what keeps us from reaching out to non-Jews. I'll give an example. Hat, coat, white shirt, black pants, that's all I have. You won't find anything in my closet but white shirt and black pants. If I'm in the grocery store, I can feel siloed because I have my uniform on. I can psychologically abstract myself from reality. I can pull myself away and put myself in a little bubble, and I can build a barrier that doesn't exist between me and the non-Jewish world. And it shouldn't be. If I actually have the uniform on, I should actually be twice as kind, twice as nice, twice as open. I should smile. As we learned last week, we can say shalom. You'll have to feel that.
Like the when a man has the kippah.
Yarmulke, yeah, kippah. Yeah, he can let that build a barrier for him. Now, let's say if he, chas v'sholom were to take it off for a non-Jew a Jewish man that doesn't wear a yarmulke, he doesn't feel like he's different because he's not wearing a yarmulke. But we cannot let that stop us. That's a perceived barrier. We should be the best people in the whole world, kind, gentle, friendly, like Rabbi Engel is saying. He says, every time I go on an airplane, Rabbi Engel says, I take the opportunity to break that ice. Speaking of what exactly I'm saying. He says, I have a hat, I have a long white beard, I have a coat, and he says, this is one way I break the ice. He says, I say to the person in front of me, he says, don't worry, sir, I don't snore too loud. And he gives people a laugh, and he breaks the ice, and he's able to open conversations with people, hoping that maybe to talk to them about God, about drawing close to God, and maybe even Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. He's always making a way. But what are some of the more deeper, insidious constraints that we put on ourselves. Fear, where some of us are afraid. Some of us, chas v'sholem, have a superiority complex, and we've proven that we aren't superior because God said, I just chose you. We showed that it came from the very beginning, Adam, through Noach, through Abraham, through the Shavatim, through giving of the Torah. It's only because of these things that any single human being can become B'nai Noach, and if they have so the desire, any human being can become a Jew. Remember, we defined elitism as, I'm on my pedestal, and the other person is down here, and he's stuck there. I'm always going to be higher than you, and you're stuck. That's elitism. Judaism doesn't say that. Judaism says, come on up. This is what we're here for. We're here to create a dwelling place for Hashem in this world. That means bringing all the nations to Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. And if any single one of them have the desire to become Jewish, they can. Now, they'll go through the challenges that we know very well, but they can do that. Okay, so what are some foreign constraints? What constraints might be imposed upon us from those who we're trying to talk to? I'm gonna explain this in a couple of stories, okay? One is a joke. So I'm gonna start with a joke and then with a story. So there was in Rome, right in front of the Vatican, St. Peter's Square or something like that. There was a Jewish boy there, and he was a poor Jewish boy, and he's collecting tzedakah. He was just begging for money. He had a big necklace on and a big Star of David. You know, he was proud of being Jewish, and he was just standing there, standing, collecting, hoping someone would come by. And some people would come by and they would drop a coin or two in, and then they would walk a little farther and come across a young poor Catholic boy. And the Catholic boy had his big chain around his neck, a big cross, and he looked very pious. And the people, when they got to him, they would pull out a couple coins, look back to the Jewish boy, pull out a couple more coins, and put him in the Catholic boy's pot. One day, along comes the Pope and his entourage, and the Pope comes to the Jewish boy, and he pulls out a lira or two, and he says, "My son, you do know that you're in a Catholic country, yes? Maybe it would be better if you went and collected in front of a synagogue of some kind. Maybe it would be better for you. Understand, this is a Catholic country. I'm trying to give you a kindness, give you some advice." So the Pope puts the money in, and his entourage, they also put a little in, and every one of his entourage puts a little in, following the pious example of the Pope. And then the Pope gets to the Catholic boy, and he says, "Oh, my son, my poor son," and he gives him a blessing that he will not be poor, And he pulls out 20 liras, looks over to the Jewish boy, pulls out 40 liras, puts it in the Catholic boy's vessel, his little bowl. And so does everybody else. They pull out a couple, whatever, look to the Jewish boy and put in a little more, right? So this goes on, and then the Jewish boy, he kind of meanders on over to the Catholic boy, and he says, "Hey, Moshe, who's this guy telling the Goldfarb brothers how to do business?" So they were together, doing business. Okay. So that's a setup. See, the point of this story is beyond the flippant nature of it, is that the Jews know what they're doing. We Jews know what we're doing when it comes to our business. Our business is Torah. Who is anybody, even the pious Pope, even when it goes up to the pious, who is he to tell us how to do our business?
To do business.
Yeah, they were in business, but our business, I'm trying to switch it around. No one can tell us, because it's our business. God gave us the Torah. We, 6 million people, heard the voice of God speak. No other nation has heard the voice of God speak and become a nation. No one else has been given such a holy Torah that explains, which is the blueprint of the universe. And not only that, God gave us the explanation of that Torah. And that's the amat where we can bring in people and connect them to God, to the Sheva Mitzvah B'nai, which are in our Torah, right? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story. Again, the subject is barriers that someone we're trying to help might put against us. So there was a great king, and this king had 12 sons and 70 provinces. And there came a day when the king said to his 12 sons, he says, sons, I think it's appropriate that you go out and you invite the leader, the prime minister of all of the 70 provinces of my kingdoms. He was a king over the whole world. 70 provinces. He says, I think we should have a celebration to celebrate the laws of the king, to celebrate the king and his kingdom. So the 12 sons go out and they invite all of the prime ministers of the 70 provinces. Thank you, sir. And they invite them, and they come on the special day, and it's a happy day, and all the prime ministers sitting in a wonderfully decorated area, and it's a great simcha, and the 12 sons are in their area in front of the king, and the king is on his throne, up on the throne, enjoying and the simcha that he's having, not only with his 12 sons, but also with all the 70 rulers of the provinces. So it came to the time in the simcha, where you stand up and you make a toast. We would say, and the oldest son stands up and he starts to talk about the laws of the king. And he says great things about the king. And he even gives over some knowledge only the son would know about the king, secret things about the king. And the first son sits down and the second stands up, the second board, and he gives over other details about the laws of the king and the kingdom. And he gives over some secrets that how the laws would come about and what the details of the laws would be, secret things. The third son goes to stand up, and interrupting him is one of the leaders of the provinces. And one of the leaders of the provinces says, that is not at all how the king's law is. And that is not at all how the king's law came about. And then before he was finished, another one of the provinces stand up and he's arguing, and they're all arguing. And then before you know it, all of the leaders of the provinces are arguing about what the sons were saying about the king, and factions begin to take place, and they begin to cluster together. 3 big factions, 4 a little smaller one, and a few others, all 70 kind of grouping into their own groups of what they think the law of the king is and how it came about and what its secrets are and what its details are. And there is pandemonium. Everyone's, and the sons are just like sitting kind of like stunned. The king is like, And the sons kind of like just file out, and the king files out, and they keep on arguing, and they're arguing over the king, and one group is shouting to another group about what the details of the king's law is, and they finally, after exhausting themselves arguing, they kind of filter out, and that's the end of this big party. So let me explain this mashal. The king is Hashem. The king is God, sitting on his throne. And he wants to have a big simcha. And he wants to have a big simcha with all the earth. In Genesis, there are 70 nations, 70 root nations of all the earth. The 12 sons are the Shavatim, the 12 tribes of Israel. 12 tribes. They are the ones that God gave the laws to at Mount Sinai. God came down and met with Israel. Israel, the 12 tribes basically is the nation of Israel. And he came down and he gave the Torah and explanations intimately with these 12, with Bnei Israel. And the son in the party wants to stand up and begin to share with the provinces all of these wondrous laws and all of the wondrous details. But what happens? One of the nations, leaders of the nation, stands up and says, that's not how the Bible is. That's not the interpretation of the Bible. Let me tell you the interpretation of the Bible and what its secret means. And then another, and another. And they start arguing, all the 70 nations are arguing who God is and what his laws are. And they start growing factions. And we know that there are large factions in the world that try to tell us what the Bible is all about, right? Big groups. I won't mention any names here right now, but we know that there are many religions that try to tell us, the ones who got the Torah at Har Sinai, what our business is. Remember the Goldfarb brothers? Mm-hmm. Who are these guys who tell us how to do business? Right. God gave us the Torah. God gave it to us, and we need to let the nations know. Now, this is going to be a foreign barrier. People are going to, I'm just telling you, that when we approach some people, they are going to counter. They're going to say, no, Messiah is so-and-so, and he came to do such and such. They're going to throw up this barrier trying to tell us who Mashiach is and trying to tell us about our law. And they're going to throw up barriers like the law has been abolished. Don't you know that the Torah doesn't exist anymore? It's nullified. And remember all the nations stood up and said, this is what, but we know because God gave us the Torah. God gave it to us, and he gave us the explanation, the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, the Messiah that has been handed down chain by chain over all the years. So we need to understand and know that we have halachic barriers, we have internal barriers that we need to overcome. We need to learn that it's okay to smile to people. It's okay to say shalom to anyone, right? We learned that last week. Rabbi Engel was blown away by that. I showed him that this morning. He was like, wow. Yeah.
Only shalom, right? We can share shalom, right?
So if it's a stranger, you don't know if they're B'nai Noach, you can say shalom. And that has to come from your heart. You got to feel out the person. Will he receive?
For sure.
Will he receive a shalom, or do you say shalom? Because you have to feel their soul. You have to be sensitive.
Right.
You definitely don't want to say it to somebody.
Right.
You don't want to say it to somebody that's going to say, "Oh yeah, shalom, I'll give you shalom." Chas v'shalom, that ever happens, and I think it would be rare. I really do. But you have to be sensitive. So, in conclusion, there was a rabbi named Yitzchak Landau. He was called the Noda Beyehuda. He lived many years ago. I think it was many years ago. It was during the times when it wasn't so great for Jews, right? And I think it was Russia. And one day he goes out and he sees a young boy crying on the street. The boy's crying, non-Jewish boy, crying. And he walks up to the little boy and he says, "Why are you crying?" And the boy starts to explain to him, my father remarried, and I have a stepmother, and my father's a baker, and I'm supposed to go out and sell a certain amount of bread in the morning and then bring the money back to my stepmother. And I lost the money, and I'm afraid of what she's going to do to me. So the Noda Yehuda gave him the exact amount that he would have made, gave it to him. And not only that, he looked hungry. He looked poor and hungry. He bought him. He says, "Give it a little more. Go get yourself something to eat and something to drink." And he went out and he did that. Okay? So 30 years later, during Pesach, it was close to the end of Pesach. Achrin Shel Pesach. There's a knock on the door, and there's a very official dressed man standing at the door, one of the officers, very official. And Rabbi Landau was scared. All of a sudden he's like, hey, and the man saw the fear in his face. He says, no, don't worry. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm not here to bring you any pain or grief. Do you remember me? He says, Rabbi Landau says, no, I don't remember you. He says, I'm that little boy 30 years ago that you gave the amount of money that I needed to give to my stepmother, and you fed me and gave me something to drink that day. And I have never, ever forgotten. Never forgotten. I've kept it with me my whole life. And now you helped me that day, now I'm going to help you. All of the bakers of the city have conspired against the Jews. And because they know that after Pesach, all of the Jews are going to run to buy chametz, right? They're all going to run to buy bread. They have every one of the bakers have conspired to poison this set of bread that the Jews buy to wipe out all of the Jews in the city. And I want you to know that. So Rabbi Landau, he says, he was so thankful, he was so grateful, and with the reunion and with the warning. So one of the things he did, he had to come up with a way to warn the Yidden without alerting the authorities, the bakers. So he got everybody, he said, it's emergency meeting. Every single Yid must come to this meeting. It was the very end of Pesach. Every Yid must come. He says, my brothers, I'm so sorry. We made a mistake calculating on the calendar of Pesach, and we actually started one day too early. So now we have to have one more day of Pesach. So he was able to put off this tragedy because the Jews, they didn't go and get that batch of bread. So what happened is that when the Jews didn't come to buy, they went to the authorities and said all the Jews are boycotting us. And it got the authorities involved. And they brought Rabbi Landau in and said, well, is this true? Have you boycotted? Or are you doing something to damage the businesses of the bakers? He says, no, not at all, because of our celebration. He says, but let the baker take a try of the bread. That's 2 days old. And the baker's face changed different colors. That's how Rabbi Engel put it. His face turned different colors. And they found out, the authorities said, why won't you taste this bread? And it came out, the conspiracy, and the Jews were saved. Now, why did I tell this story? Why did I tell this story? I'll tell you why. Because Rabbi Engel hit the nail on the proverbial head. He said the most important part of this story is not that Rabbi Landau gave tzedakah to a little boy, to a non-Jew. It wasn't that the Jews were saved from a conspiracy. We have dozens of stories. He says the most important thing about the story is the deeper understanding of what we can glean from it. And that is, this is how we should approach all people. All people, whether Jewish or non-Jewish. If we see someone in need, we're going to help them. If we see someone might need some help in any way, if they need some tzedakah, we should help them. If they look hungry, we should feed them. Now he says, if someone come to ask me, a pasak din, if someone came to ask me and said, should I take this extra $5 that I have and put it in the pushka, or should I save it to give to someone on the street? Obviously the halacha would be, we have to first put it in the pushka. We have to help the Jews, because there are a lot of poor Jews. But if the shaila would have been, can I give extra money that I have to non-Jews that need help? Absolutely. Wow, of course. What's the question? Of course you should help.
Right.
So the moral of this story is we have boundaries. Some of them are in our imagination. Some of them are going to come to us from the outside. Some of them are halachich. And it's good for us to know our halachic boundaries. But we should glean from this that no matter the boundaries, we have to do our best and not let them become an excuse, whether they're perceived or actualized, to do our best to bring light to the world, to make the world a place where we can build a resting place here for Hashem. That's what he wants. Hashem wants a dwelling place in this world, in this lowest world. And that can only happen by what's called Yeshev, I think it's Yeshev Olam, settling of the world. And that means that the nations need to take on the mitzvahs b'nei Noach through Torah and mitzvahs, through the Jewish people. They can't just say, oh, that's a good idea, I think I'll do it. That doesn't connect them spiritually to God. They have to come through Torah and mitzvahs. And it should happen right away, and Hashem should give us the seichel and the chachma, the wisdom and the understanding to know how and when to do all of these things. Shekayach.